Good morning. This is Arun Bhaskar from BKBB, an acronym for Bhaskar Ki Business Market. We bring you policy analysis, stories, and conversations once a week. And every morning, we bring you news, not exactly news, but news behind the news. And it's nice to see you here. We are there every morning at 8:15 a.m. Do log in, click the subscribe button. Please click the like button, it helps us. And most important, tell your friends about us. And today, we have interesting news, good news, bad news, worrying news. And my co anchors today are, are Katya. Welcome, Katya.
Yes, sir.
Isha. Welcome, Isha. And Anurag. Welcome, Anurag. And today, the four titles that we're going to talk about are given on a screen. The first, of course, is a huge market crash yesterday and what was happening with India officially and what was happening in the markets too. The second one is basically on the tariffs that the government imposed on oil products, LNG. This is okay. Now Katya will explain the rest. And then we have a story where shrimp exports could suffer, and Andhra Pradesh is worried about them. And lastly is the silver lining, how iPhone exports have soared. Will they continue? We'll see later. And let me begin today's discussions with what's happening around the world and in India. Markets crashed yesterday, big time. Even India, the markets crashed. A lot of valuation was knocked on the market. And while the markets are crashing, the entire Indian government team was sitting in the US trying to persuade the US to change its laws. It was sad to see them sitting there and talking to the US constantly, even criticizing, blaming China for causing this mess. Maybe they want to make US feel happy. Instead, they should have been looking at developing new markets in East Asia. Talk to Indonesia, talk to Malaysia, talk to China, talk to Korea, talk to Japan. This is the time when you have to actually look for new markets and not sit wagging your tail before the US. Unfortunately, we are looking at a market where, as the Singapore Prime Minister said, the old market is dead. Free trade is dead. There's going to be turmoil. And you need relationships with every country around the world. I hope the government of India listens to this. And that takes us to the second story, which is equally disturbing, and that is by Katya, where she'll talk about the taxes.
Thank you, sir. So, as we know, the markets have entirely entered decisively into a bear zone. It's 2 years after the bull run started, but the Indian in local news is not helping too much either. Yesterday, government hiked duty on petrol and diesel by 2 rupees each. But the good news is all marketing companies, which are the petrol pump owning companies, are not going to pass them on to retail customers as of now. So, and but this is actually a change that has come because of it's very usual for India to reduce hike duties when oil prices fall. If you see on April 7th, which was yesterday, oil prices hit a dropped a 4-year low because after markets crashed, a lot of commodities crashed as well. And this is a very old mechanism of an Indian government to actually increase duties when price is low. If you remember, when oil crashed to a extremely low during the pandemic, there were 4 or 5 excise cuts, went up by over 10-15 rupees. Each of the excise duty has gone up really heavily. This is a way for the government to maximize revenue. It's a very old story, old way to increase revenue. But right now, we do not know if it's passed on to the retail. It might have an impact on inflation. So, what do you think, sir? You think it's going to have For now they are not being passed on. So what is going to be the impact? And it looks like oil prices will be low because of the recession fears. So what is your take on it?
Look, the very fact that the government is not reducing the prices at the pump, even though international prices have fallen, means that the government wants to collect as much money as possible.
Right.
The imposition of taxes is a way of the government collecting more money because it's
Mm.
going to lose big time
Mm.
on the lowering of tariffs because of the US threat. And so, with the result, the government's caught. It has promised a lot of freebies to the electorate. It has not been able to galvanize production in India, and it's going to lose the comfortable income that it got from imports and exports. So, the softest option it has is to increase the prices at the petrol pumps. I think that's
Right.
what's happening. Customers are going to be hit. The customers have already lost purchasing power. The middle class is squeezed. What this will mean, I don't know. But let's see. Uh, on the other hand, there's one more problem that's coming up, and that is in Andhra Pradesh. Could we have that story by Isha?
Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. The headline I'm bringing you is from The Wire and it's titled US Tariff Hike Disrupts Andhra Pradesh's Vital Shrimp Export Sector. Andhra Pradesh aquaculture sector, which makes up approximately 32% of India's seafood exports, according to data from 23-24, is facing an acute crisis due to the steep tariffs imposed by the United States. The increased tariffs on shrimp has significantly affected exporters and shrimp farmers, forcing them to distress sale in domestic markets. In correspondence with the Union Minister of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal, Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu highlighted how the 27% import tariff imposed upon Indian shrimp, in addition to the existing 5.77% countervailing duty, creates a significant cost disadvantage for Indian products. He also talks about how competitors like Ecuador face lower tariffs, which is around 10%, resulting in an approximately 20% duty disparity that undermines the competitiveness of Indian shrimp in its primary export destination. Shrimp consignments have been stranded at different US ports, and other exports are en route. Unable to export, shrimp farmers have redirected their product into domestic markets, which has caused a significant price drop to rupees 100 to 180 to 250 a kg, which is a pittance as compared to their usual export rate. This rate hike has also indirectly affected exports to countries like Vietnam, Thailand, and Japan, who previously imported Indian seafood added value and then re exported this to the US. Data from the Marine Products Export Development Authority confirmed that the US is the top importer of Indian seafood overall in 2023-24, representing 34.53% of the total export value. Of this, 92% is accounted for by shrimp. This has significantly affected small scale aqua farmers who, unlike agriculturists, cannot really cultivate any other crops. They are running into losses, and the revised prices in the domestic markets are not even enough to cover the cost of feed, let alone labor and loan installments. The government has to help these farmers and take into account how this is affecting various stakeholders and do something about this. Otherwise, the seafood industry and shrimp in particular will collapse, affecting millions of lives. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story, sir.
You're right, Isha. The shrimp farmers are going to have a tough time. And again, the answer is a simple one: diversify markets. We've depended too long on an easy market called the USA. You have to diversify, you have no choice. And they are difficult markets. Selling to Japan, selling to South Korea is difficult. But just like South Korea and Japan, which are very close to USA, and now talking to China, India must learn to look at new markets and talk to new people. The markets are big, and Southeast Asia is growing faster than the West, and India must look at those markets. Okay, we've got one more story, and before the story is told, let me remind you that you should send in your questions, your comments. We'll try to address them as much as possible. Okay, we have one more story, and that's by Anurag. Anurag, could you come in?
Good morning. Amid the tariff tension between India and the USA, the tech giant Apple has exported iPhones worth rupees 1.5 trillion, accounting to more than $10 billion. Apple has recorded a staggering 76% of year-on-year growth in the financial year of 2024 and 25, while doubling the company's committed target. According to the Indian Cellular Electronics Association (ICEA), Apple accounted for about 75% of India's total smartphone exports, which may have crossed 2 trillion rupees. The monthly iPhone shipments from India to US averaged to 12,500 crores, with March recording the highest exports worth 20,000 crores to bring in additional inventory space for its largest market, the USA. This immense growth could be because of the PLI scheme, which was introduced in 2021, or is it because the iPhone manufacturing is backed by Indian industry giant, the Tata Group? What's your take on this, sir?
Thank you, Anurag. Yes, you have highlighted a silver lining in the midst of all this gloom. And the three major players that are making iPhones in India are Pegatron, Foxconn, and the Tatas. The Tatas being the biggest, and the Tatas is in negotiation with Pegatron to buy over that as well. So it remains the largest player and will dwarf Foxconn in a big way. But it also highlights one important thing. Exports is a difficult area and big players are required. Small players cannot weather the storms. There's a second lesson that needs to be learned, and that is please remember that electronics exports may look very big, but they're based on imported components, so the value addition is very thin. And there's a third question mark that is there, and that is will they be subject to the same tariff restriction that Trump has? Will they become expensive, making India lose its advantage over other countries, other manufacturing centers? I don't know. And if the price of Apple phones for the customer goes up, will customers buy Apple phones? Because there's Huawei in the wings with a more powerful telephone waiting to be sold. So, well, turbulent times, very interesting times, and the need for, and again, I go back to the Singapore PM's words, the need for looking at alternatives is crucial. And you should listen to the talk by the Singapore Prime Minister day before yesterday. It's a 7-minute talk on YouTube. Just listen to it. Very sober, very alarming, and even prophetic. And yes, questions that started coming in. The first question is why is India paying so much attention to the US? The reasons are obvious. One, the US has been one of the largest export markets for India. Stupid, but we did it. Second, it is quite possible, as we mentioned in one of our podcasts as well as an article, it's quite possible that the US has an immense blackmailing potential over India. This is what was suggested openly by Lavrov when he came to India in November 2023. The third is the unwillingness of Indian ministers to move away from US and Europe and New Zealand. These are three areas that they're constantly going promoting. Look at the Eastern markets. ASEAN growth is faster than the growth in Europe and in America, even combined. ASEAN is where the growth is. Don't be imperious with them. Go with them as equals and talk to them and develop markets. That is what India should be doing. Can the US is important? It was important. But now it's a cause for turbulence. It's time to look away. And that takes us to the next question. The next question is again on the should the government not ease customers' pains by not charging duties and taxes on oil products? Yes, you're right. The government should not tax Indians so much. Tax the rich. Leave the middle class alone. The poor people get freebies. The rich people have enough cash. The middle class is squeezed constantly. And the middle class is what brings you the largest amount of money. We have a little respect for the middle class. Don't tax them. But then the government has to balance its freebies and reduce those freebies also. Well, let's see how the government behaves. And there's a third question. Uh, can the shrimp farmers look at alternative products and product lines? Difficult. Shrimp farming is focused on one product, and the farms are not designed to take any other thing except food. It is labor intensive, it's capital intensive, it's labor intensive, and it's got a very, very specific market. But that is why it is again the largest fish eating countries are the East. Look at the Eastern markets. India needs to decouple from the USA very quickly. And then we have a fourth question. Should India be paying so much attention to the iPhone exports? Well, any export is good. But as time has shown us, and as data shows us, the largest incremental ratio of benefits that we get is from textiles and agriculture. For every lakh invested in these sectors, you have more employment than in other sectors. Electronics is one where the value looks high, but the employment potential is low, and India desperately needs employment today. Employment means if I get a job, I pay taxes. If I get a job, I look after family. If I get a job, I contribute to GDP. Electronics does that in a limited way. Focus on value added areas where the ICOR, incremental capital output ratio, is high, especially textiles, especially agriculture. And yes, thank you very much for sending in the questions and the comments. Your comments are wonderful, they're heartwarming. And yes, do tell your friends about us. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. And I hope to see you tomorrow morning at 8:15. Look forward to another session with you. Take care.